In this session, we have developing AI literacy for middle school students. And we have two excellent presenters to talk about that, Helen Zhang from Boston College and Daniela De Paula from MIT Media Lab. And I'll let you introduce a little bit more about yourselves.
Awesome. Helen, do you want to get it started with the introductions and I'll share my screen?
Yeah, I will get started. Hi, everyone. Sorry, Daniela and I can only join during this time. So if you can have a chance, maybe you can type in chat about a little bit about yourself while I will introduce our group. My name is Helen Zhang, and as Nick introduced, I'm from Boston College. I'm a learning scientist working in the School of Education. And today, Daniela De Paula is going to join us. And then Daniela is a graduate student from MIT Media Lab. Today, we're going to talk about this developing middle school student AI literacy project, as we call it, daily curriculum. And yeah, the first part of our presentation is going to focus mainly on the curriculum introduction. Daniela will help you dive deeply into one of the activities. And then for the second session, when Daniela unfortunately couldn't join us, then I will work on talk about our implementation lessons we learned and what we observed. This is just a very brief kind of a picture of all the people involved in this project. This is a project funded by NSF, and our PI is Irene Lee. She has been in this field for a long time. She has those project guts. I'm not sure whether any of you may have used that. And we have Daniela and Safina are both graduate students, and we also have another co-PI, Cynthia Braziel. She is a professor at MIT Media Lab, and her specialty is around artificial intelligence. We also have our wonderful STEAM Ahead. That's our school partner. It's an after-school program focused on supporting diverse students. That's what we have to do. Yeah. Next slide. Just a very quick, brief introduction about how our definition around AI literacy. We felt that specifically at the K-12 level, it's important that students will learn at least the 3 core domains in order to become AI literate. That is, they need to have some kind of understanding about the technical concepts. They need to understand about ethical and societal impacts, and also, given in the future they are going to have a career in this AI age, it's important they understand about the impact of AI on their future careers. That's the overall guiding line for our daily curriculum. Next slide, please. And for our motivation, as I mentioned, that it's mainly we were thinking about how can we prepare, especially the middle schoolers, to become this AI-enabled workforce in the future. And we have another main goal is we also want to broaden participation in AI, particularly engaging those students who have been underrepresented in STEM and computer science education. Next. Yeah, this is just some example. Also, a lot of our students may have already used like Snapchat, Amazon Alexa, and this is also all kinds of little small robots they have been doing in either in school or after school programs. So it's important that they also be aware about this artificial intelligence innate or inspired tools they actually have been using in everyday life. Next, please.
All right, I'll take it from here. I just want to comment actually on the last slide with all those examples of artificial intelligence. I started doing this work like only 2 years ago. And at the beginning, like when I asked students, you know, what is AI? A lot of them said killer robots or like artificial intelligence that would take over the world. And I had to we kind of had to show them that artificial intelligence is actually all around them every day. I've actually seen that shifting in the past few years. So I think a lot more kids are starting to understand that AI is a part of their everyday life and not just the far off future and the end of humanity, unfortunately. Okay, Great. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the daily curriculum, and then I'm going to walk you specifically through how we scaffold the generative AI curriculum that we've developed. So the daily curriculum is 30 hours. You can see the link to the curriculum here if you want to check it out. We kind of have this multidisciplinary team who develop the curriculum from backgrounds in child development, ethics education, AI education, and then also career development education. And so like Helen mentioned, there's these 3 key pillars of the curriculum that focus on technical, ethical, and career development. And we weave them in throughout the entire curriculum so that students are starting to understand the implications of AI on both society as it is right now and their careers in the future. The main camp that we did last year was through STEAM Ahead that Helen mentioned earlier. This was a summer workshop. We did it all virtually last summer, and we worked with 31 students and 3 out of school time educators. We've since expanded it, and we've reached about I would say about 150 students at this point with our curriculum, and we're looking forward to expanding it in the coming years as well. So overall, the idea is that if we integrate AI ethics, concepts, and then careers, and we do this through lots of different types of activities, including discussions around the ethics of artificial intelligence, real-world examples, playful tools, simulations of how AI works. AI is a very complex topic, and so we use a lot of these methods to get students familiar and have really develop intuition on how AI works so that when they see it in their everyday lives, they can identify it. And overall, we hope that the curriculum helps students recognize artificial intelligence in their everyday lives. They don't just think it's the killer robots of the future, become curious and excited about having their own careers with AI or working alongside AI in the future. And you can see some of the other ones, like understand bias and systems, understand a little bit about the mechanisms behind AI, test and train their own models. I think another really important part is that they become digitally literate citizens and they can advocate for themselves in kind of a world that's been infiltrated with AI. Sometimes they don't even recognize it's there. I'll give you a really quick example that I like to think about, which is Somerville, which is a town that's or a city that's right next to Cambridge, where MIT is located. They became one of the first cities to put a moratorium on facial recognition technologies in their police force. And a lot of people credit that to the fact that a lot of the people advocating for this moratorium were academics from the surrounding universities in the area. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that people who have the education and knowledge about the technologies are able to advocate for themselves in a way that they're saying that this technology doesn't work the way it should right now. We don't want it used in our community. And really with this curriculum, we want to provide everyone with that opportunity to understand technologies and form their own opinions about them so they can do their own advocating. Really quick, really complicated image of the overview of the curriculum, but we have 10 units and each unit is paired again with this ethics, awareness of that topic in their everyday life, and then finally how it might apply to their careers in the future. So I'm showing you this picture right here. This was a picture that the Jonas Brothers actually posted about a little over a year ago, right when the pandemic started. There was this viral app called FaceApp that a lot of students were using and middle school students were using that basically took your face and made it like 50 years in the future. And I show this picture mainly because this was generated by generative AI, or we like to call them, or we use the term GANs, generative adversarial networks. And the idea here is that there's manipulated images going around the internet right now. And it's just important that students recognize that how they're being manipulated, that they can be manipulated, so that when they maybe see something that's not as obvious as the Jonas Brothers 50 years in the future, they're able to kind of think critically about the information that they're seeing. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of how we scaffold this idea of generative AI with students. First, and you can find all of this on the website that I sent out that I showed earlier. I'll also post a link in the chat after I'm done. But we first start with the idea that AI can generate things. a lot of people think that AI cannot be creative. It's just an objective, neutral source of info, or like a objective and neutral tool. And they don't really think that it can like think about creating new things or be creative itself. So we give them lots of examples of generative AI. We actually trick them. We have them tell us which ones they think were created by AI and which ones weren't created by AI. And then we actually, every single thing that they look at was generated by AI. So by the time they're able to reflect and notice that they're all generated by AI, their mind is blown at the breadth of what AI can create and do. And so once they kind of understand that this is even a concept that's possible, we teach them about generative adversarial networks, which is the technical concept that goes that enables AI to create new things. So we walk through this very complex name. So we talk about generate means to create, adversarial means to oppose, and networks we relate back to neural networks, which is a topic that we've already covered at this point in the curriculum. So we dive into a simulated activity in which students played the different roles within a GAN. I'll quickly kind of outline some of the analogies that we use to describe the process of a GAN. And again, I really just want to like highlight that we focus on the intuition around the concepts. We don't have students actually code things or create things, but we want them to understand like what are the moving parts here and how generally is it like taking in data and making a prediction or creating something new. So I talked about things opposing one another. These are two roosters clearly going back and forth and about to fight. The generative adversarial network is made out of two neural networks that are working against one another. So one network is trying to create something new, and the other create something that passes by the discriminator. And then the discriminator network is trying to make sure that it doesn't pass if it's not a real image. So if I'm a generator, I might try to generate a new face. And if I'm a discriminator, I'm trying every way that I can to say like, no, this is a fake image. No, this is a fake image. And I'll go a little bit more into detail about that through some other examples. So we really try to highlight this idea of like them opposing one another. They're not really working together. So another example of how a generator and discriminator might work against one another is a generator could be a counterfeiter that creates fake money. And the discriminator might be a police officer who might recognize some of this recognize the counterfeit money. So the discriminator or the police officer was trained on how to recognize something's fake money, and the generator is trying to just get it to be past the discriminator. Another example that we like to use is a little bit more relevant to children, which is an art teacher asking a student to create a picture of Picasso. Now, the student has never seen a Picasso picture before, but the teacher has seen many Picasso pictures before. So the generator, who is the student, starts creating a bunch of pictures and showing it to the art teacher, and the art teacher will say, you need more lines here, or there's too many curves, or the colors aren't bold enough. So the discriminator will give a little bit of feedback to the generator, and the generator will keep trying to guess until they get close enough to a Picasso photo. So these are just some like ways to start building intuition around the topics. Next, we work with students who test out various types of GANs. So I'm actually going to show you one very briefly. Well, I have two things actually. So here is the kind of journal that we use with students. And if you click that, you'll create your own copy of the journal, but the journal kind of gives students a handful of existing tools that they can use already developed on the internet, and they start practicing with them. I'm going to show you this face. This person does not exist. Okay, so these images right here are actually generated by a GAN. So this is not a real person. This is an image that's generated by a computer. And again, the way that this is done is a generator starts generating random pixels. The discriminator was trained on a bunch of images that look like people. So every time the generator creates random pixels, the discriminator says this either is a person or it's not a person, and it gives a little bit of feedback so that the generator can create something new that might be better and might pass more likely. So I can just show you some examples of these. Students have like their mind is blown at how the fact that these are not real people. I mean, mine is too still. But I think this is a really important tool for them to be able to see, like, kind of in their head, to understand like what the societal implications could be in a world that we're creating images of people that don't actually exist. All right, so you can see in that journal, we kind of walked them through some of these things. And I'm very quickly going to run through this last part because I unfortunately have to leave at 11, and then I'll let Helen take over. So we like look at some of these faces with students. We show them examples of GANs. Then we like talk to the students about the fact that these are not real. We call them deepfakes, and we talk about deepfake technology, which is a way that generative adversarial networks can be used for harm. So as you can see, images are real, or as you can probably guess, images of real people or videos of real people could potentially deceive people in thinking that certain situations are real, certain things that people said were real, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated and harder to understand and kind of perceive. So there used to be some tricks and tools where you can learn to like recognize GANs or deepfakes. It's becoming increasingly harder to do so. So we talk with kids about the consequence of this. They talk about some of their thoughts around this. And then we talk a little bit about how they might identify them. And again, like I mentioned, these methods are not perfect, and might work sometimes and might not work other times. And that was another point that we wanted to really get across to students, is that like even though we're creating more sophisticated technology, and we can think about ways to kind of like perceive them on our own and be aware of them on our own, but likely that won't work in the long run. So
I wish I could keep telling you that our mission in life is connecting people, but it isn't. We just want to predict your future.
Mark Zuckerberg's having long stares. It looks pretty unnatural. The eyelids blur when he blinks. Different parts of his mouth get blurry. But it is still pretty hard to perceive. Oh. Okay. So we walk through some of these examples, give them some understanding. They watch some videos. We talk about maybe some of the ways you can detect it in a photo. You can see here, this person's ear isn't fully has a cutoff there. There's like some weird straight hairs up there. The eyebrow kind of goes into the side of the face. So there are some like irregularities that students start to pick up on. We give them a quiz before and after we teach them these things, and to like kind of get them thinking about how they might identify it in the future. And surprisingly, I think a lot of students have a difficult time both in the pre and post test. And this is something that we actually thought that we could teach them. And it turns out that it's really hard to detect a deepfake. And I think that kind of leads us to the next part of this, which is how might this impact society? So we talk a little bit about how certain companies and entities are starting to create policies around deepfakes. We kind of take the policies of these different companies or communities, and we distill them into kind of like their basic tenets that the students might be familiar with. And we have a conversation with students about, which policy do you think is most appropriate? Do we think we should have policy in general around deepfakes? And this kind of, I really like this part of the activity and part of the lesson, because I think students have built a technical understanding. So they start to understand like, what are these things capable of and how can they create new things? Then they have some examples of ways that it can go poorly. And then they're able to like finally make some decisions on how they want to use them in the future, or how they think society should use them in the future. And I think that's going to be a really important skill as students get, as AI becomes more prevalent in people's lives and students are starting to understand that AI can make decisions and predictions that they might not even be aware of. So I think regulation will be a really important part of this. And so we start to teach students about maybe some of the ways that we might approach this and how not everyone's approaching it in the same way. All right. With that, I unfortunately have to leave, but I'm going to pass it over to Helen. Great to meet all of you.
Thank you, Daniela. I see that in the chat there is one question asking about whether those photos and videos copies are real person. These are all faked ones. That's why students had a hard time in both the pre and post almost kind of surveys we conducted. That students would say, why? How come they look so real? Yeah. Okay. Daniela has been talking about it was mainly about the generative AI part we have been used in this curriculum. I also want to go back to this slide that to mention that overall this is a 30-hour curriculum, and we have literally 30 hours where we started having this. You can see this in the we have in total 10 units. Each of the units we always kind of integrate both the ethics, awareness of AI impact on the society and the ethical issues, and also the career part. For example, we started with a broader introduction about what is AI. Students get a chance to pursue this best peanut butter and jelly sandwich and the ethical metrics activity. They understand that actually for any of the technology design, you need to have considered certain kind of stakeholders, and the stakeholders might have different values that will impact the technology design. And then the second one, we move into the logic systems, and we have this decision trees activity where students actually do this kind of path plan. They create the decision trees, try to sort out different kind of pasta, and they also test their decision trees using when we introduce a new type of pasta and test it. That's where they recognize that their decision trees are different. Some of the decision trees might be better in terms of sort out the new pasta, new types of pasta, whereas some others may not. This then leads them into the introduction of the bias issues in AI, and we have students have the discussions, look at all the kind of different bias in AI inspired tools, and we talk about all those kind of implications. And this is also where we started introducing the whole career piece, and we have students started really thinking about what do you want your future job will look like, and then in the next activity, students start exploring their own work interest. And also at the same time, for the third unit, we move into the supervised learning. That's where we actually also use the teachable machine activity. Students test it and they try to train different models using different types of data sets. And then next, we move into the neural networks and look at some examples. And students actually, for this, they play some games, try to mimic what the nodes at different layers in neural networks actually work. And then the next few units are all around generative AI. That's where we have classifier versus generator, and also the deepfake activities that Daniela has been talking about. That's in unit 8. Also, we want to point out that for all this, even for the deepfake activities where students get a chance to, we also develop all kinds of tools students can experience this. AI created art, AI created stories, AI created text. For all this activity afterwards, we always try to engage students into discussions about this. For example, for the generative art piece, we have students actually doing this almost like a discussion or debate about who's going to own this. Who is going to own the art created by this technology? Should this be the artist, or should this be the programmer? Who should own this, right? And students had a really heated debate about all this. And then the same issue for deepfake, students talk about the policy issues. Why? Because if you look at the video of Mark Zuckerberg, it looks so real. How can how can you tell? I have to, just as Daniela said, even after this activity, students still feel I cannot tell which one is deepfake or which one is not. So then that gets into the issue about, especially given it's COVID, there are tons of deepfake videos on the website. So kids decided to start talking about, how can we decide which ones we should believe in or which ones are actually the fake ones. That's overall kind of, the overarching, I would say the skeleton of this curriculum, but it's overall, it's 30 hours. It's always, we introduce some technology and kids think about, explore the ethical and also the impact of AI on their future careers throughout this unit. Okay. And now let's just stop that here. Also, please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions. The next piece I want to talk about is mainly about our experience. This curriculum last summer, we have implemented in 2 summer camps. Again, as I mentioned, the majority of our summer camp participants are students, minority students, mainly African American students and Hispanic students. I think we have over 95 participants are those minority students. And because of its COVID, a lot of our activities, actually, we have to think about how to offer this through online. And this camp has been implemented via Zoom. And we have specifically made some kind of changes. For example, this is the past learn activity. And if it's in-person session, we actually hand out each student will have a zip bag with all kinds of different types of pasta. But with this online environment, what we did, we instead using Google Slides and created all the pictures of different kind of pastas, and then create all those, you can see those kind of branches and students can move. And basically for each of the students will take one slide and they will just move all the pastas and add those kind of classifying features and move the pasta pictures there so that everybody else in the camp can also see it. We can kind of talk about this. The good part of this is actually students can easily see each other's work, and they will find out, oh, actually, my classmates, actually, they have different decision trees than me. This is the one change we did. Yeah, but the main thing is just, I have to admit that for this kind of things, one part is easier for students to see each other's work, but another part we found out, particularly for teachers, it's hard for teachers to track students' engagement. Because again, with diverse students, some students don't feel comfortable, let's say, share online. Some students don't like kind of talk aloud, and some of our students only choose to communicate literally via chat. And it actually requires more teaching kind of stuff. We turned out we pair for each camp, we have at least one teacher who is dedicated to keep an eye on the chat. Because sometimes we have some students are very active on chat, and they would love to share their thoughts only through chat instead of kind of speaking out. This is one challenge. And also, as I mentioned, that given that some of the students do not actually turn on the camera, so it's difficult to really track about their engagement. I think you guys are all teachers, you know the challenge, right? Yeah. These are the things, yeah. And also we feel that also because we only, like in this past learning activity, we only show students the pictures, this 2D pictures about those pastas. And the problem is that there are also kind of other things, for example, the relative size of the different kind of pastas or the texture of different pastas actually got lost. And so we feel that, definitely would be great if it's go back to in-person where kids actually can manipulate the pasta so that they can come up with more, I would say, more sophisticated classifying features. Whereas here in this online session, kids often just come up with features like whether it's long, whether it's small, whether it's, yeah, those are just relatively less sophisticated ones. And also because it's online, kids are working on this individually, so we actually lose a lot of those kind of collaboration opportunities. Okay, next. Yeah, this is so far for our observation. We found out actually, even though this is an online camp, students' participation and engagement are actually pretty high every day throughout this is a 2-week camp. We meet with students every day for 3 hours in the morning, and every day, even throughout the later part of the whole camp, we have nearly 90% of attendance rate. So we feel that's pretty high. And the submission rate actually it varies, depends on what kind of activity. Because we hold this daily curriculum using Google Classroom, and for each of the activity we have like some kind of questions, and sometimes also students have reflection journals at the end of the day. And we found out that definitely the submission rates are really depend. For example, for that deep fake activity, we see very high submission rates because especially at the beginning when we show students, yeah, I can show the example. Yeah, this is an example about this kind of assessment we use. This is a we basically ask the students, this is you drag whether it's art or it's not art, and all this kind of things. We ask a student to submit this work through Google Classroom. We found out that actually the submission rate for this is pretty high. I think it's maybe because it's more art, and then students definitely we see a lot of interesting students. Whereas if we have some others, for example, the reflection rate, the daily reflection submission rate is typically around like 50% of students. The next one is, yeah, we found out definitely students prefer different kind of ways of engagement. Some would just only use chat exclusively. Some will turn on the camera and talk to us, whereas some other students only turn on the speaker and talk to us. And also definitely different kind of engagement levels for different activities. Okay, this one is also about our experience of students engagement piece. Particularly, we want to focus on the ethics piece because we feel, for middle school level students, they started thinking more abstractly, and they also started thinking about really, everything's impact on the society. So with all this, what we found out is that students actually really enjoyed all this kind of ethics related activities. For example, this investigating bias in all the AI tools, the deep fakes, or the spread of misinformation, particularly through social media, and all this kind of ethics-related activities still receive high engagement from students. And we did this kind of after the camp. We asked the students if they want to volunteer to be interviewed with us, and we in total interviewed about 11 students, and 10 of them rated those ethics-related activities as their favorite activities. And also, students also talk about how they internalize what they think about from this camp to connect it to the technology design issues. For example, one of our students said that if people who make the AIs don't think enough through them, then they will have those kind of bad consequences. That's where you will see all the kind of bias, and people would get into a lot of trouble if you are using those kind of tools. So we feel that students definitely started to internalize the connections between the ethics and the technology design, those issues. Feel that's a exciting kind of findings. And yeah. Next, this is just an example about some of the discussions we had with students. And we found out particularly students had some hard time trying to understand what does bias mean, what does fairness mean. And for example, on the left side, you can see we asked the students kind of to start this discussion, what does fairness mean to you? we have different kind of answers. Students say it means to treat everyone equally or to treat everyone with the same level of fairness or equity. And we found out that particularly students had some misconceptions around being equal and equity. And we had some kind of discussions around this, and some of our students ended up searching online, trying to teach each other, which I think is a great discussion around this topic. And similarly, we have some some similar issues around bias discussion. And here is also another example about this investigating bias activity. This is where we presented different kind of case studies. And this is the one we're presenting this case study about facial analysis. And on the right side, you can see this is a picture of an Asian man, and he was trying to upload his picture to a kind of a job application website. And they said, well, this is not acceptable because the eyes are closed. So this is definitely a kind of bias, and it's a bias of this facial recognition system used by this website. And then we have students kind of look into issues like this. And then the good thing about this is connected to the kind of job applications, and students can easily kind of make connections to themselves because they assume in the future they're going to be going through this kind of process in the future. Yeah. And so after students explore these cases, we make it completely open up, ask the student, what are your takeaways from these explorations? What do you think we can do? Yeah, that's where we see, again, like I see a lot of discussions from students. Yeah. And this is the kind of teachable machine activities, as I mentioned, that, yeah, you can see Daniela is there to be hands down, hands up. We do this demo to students, and the students also play with these tools to do this all by themselves. And this is the neural networks, and we use participatory simulations. We have students to act as the input layer, and we have another set of students in hidden layer and another kind of set of students in output layer. Because it's Zoom, we put them in different breakout Zooms, and then so that they wouldn't see each other's work. But afterwards, after we did this, and the students were trying to reflect on what they did, try to understand the mechanism of neural networks. And I need to point out also for this activity, we found out actually students had the least gains on this. This is something we are still wondering what can do, because one potential reason is during the camp, we only have about 40 minutes on this activity, and students were acting kind of almost in different breakout Zooms for the nodes are in different layers. But we feel we did not really get a chance to really, let's say, kids in the input layer would talk to kids in the hidden layer, and then talk to kids in the output layer, so that they will reflect all together, so that they can piece out all the different pieces around neural networks, so that they can understand the mechanism. And overall, for our next iteration, we're thinking about building more scaffolding and also building more reflection activities for this. And this is a part of the generative AI. This is the first introduction activity where present different kind of colors and then have students try it out, how to generate a color look like those. Yeah, these are the GANs activities that Daniela has been talking about. And also for the career development piece, I want to particularly point out for the career part, the career development activities in this camp is different from the traditional kind of activities where students explore what kind of STEM careers will be, and then try to understand those. For this is we started from students' interests. We did not tell them what are the STEM activities. We actually ask the students first, just reflect on the things that you are interested in, and what kind of in the future, what kind of work environment that you want to work in. And then they go through this ONET assessment, try to find a few matches of potential jobs they want to do. Then the next step is they take those jobs and try to explore how AI will impact those jobs. And we feel this is feels more relevant to students because first of all, they started from the jobs that they themselves are potentially going into in the future. And then they look at how AI will impact those jobs. But instead of exploring how AI will replace their jobs, because a lot of times when people think about AI and job, they will think about, oh, AI will take over my jobs. What can I do? Here is we are more thinking about how you can actually work, how AI can help with your job in the future. Actually, one of our students said he actually talked to his mom, said, Mom, are you afraid that in the future AI is going to take over the jobs? And the mom actually said, no, I think I will be able to work together with AI to make my job better. I think that's the great attitude, and that's what we want to achieve in this curriculum. And here is we just show a quote about students were thinking about, show that the students were saying that when we're doing the job career search, a lot of the jobs that popped up were jobs that I was interested in, and it was already connected to AI. So I feel that definitely shows that a job that I want to will be connected to AI. Yeah. So their attitude is more about how AI can make my job better instead of how AI will take over my job. And this is just a very quick about the learning outcomes we see. We measure students' learning outcome using 3 different kind of assessment. First, we have the AI concept inventory. AI concept inventory are a set of, we have around 35 multiple choice questions. I try to test the students' understanding about basic AI, have basic AI concepts. For example, the machine learning, the supervised learning. And students need to understand about why do we need to put a label on those kind of pictures. Those are the kind of fundamental concepts of AI. And we found that from pre to post, we see a lot of increase in students in general about their understanding about what counts as AI and how decision trees works and how machine learning works. But we found out that we did not see much more gains in neural networks and GANs. As I mentioned, that we feel that the neural networks, the treatment time is really limited. We should build in more scaffolding and more reflections on that. And GANs is literally based on neural networks. So we feel that's definitely the improvement we want to make. And the second piece of assessment we did is we come up with a set of survey questions asking about students' interest in AI, whether they think AI is connected to their daily lives, and whether they feel anxious toward AI. In this assessment, we see positive outcomes throughout all the 3 aspects. We see increases in their interest in AI, and they definitely feel now they recognize AI is literally relevant to their daily life, from their everyday, from the phones they're using to even some of the video games they play. And we definitely see that students become less anxious toward AI. Another piece, the third kind of assessment we did is around students' awareness of the impact of AI on their future jobs, and also their own, this is a kind of career adaptability skills. These are, the career adaptability skills are more about students' belief that they can survive in this AI age. That means they feel confident that they can, easily use their skills even in this AI age. We just see all the significant increase in this construct as well. Overall, kind of conclusion, we found that our approach of combining this AI, ethics, and careers definitely help students to develop AI literacy. And we feel this is suitable for middle school students, particularly this career piece. We feel it's very critical because, as a lot of research have already seen that middle school is really this critical age where students started forming ideas about their future careers. And we found out students are particularly engaged in discussion of ethics in AI, and they can identify how and why some kind of AI applications will be unfair to themselves and for others. And some of the students even were talking about, let's say, for example, this Amazon recommendation system. How can you potentially revise it to make it better? And some of the facial recognition systems, and just as Daniela mentioned about in Cambridge, right, they have problems. And students will brainstorm what kind of, what might be some of the solutions. For example, should we make the data set like a diverse, or not only with a big data set, but also make sure it's diverse, all those kind of issues. We also found out that this approach definitely see lots of interest among students, but also they also talk to their families. We feel this is actually a big success to us because think about it, how many times kids will talk to their parents about what they learn in school or what they do in the summer camp, right? At least some of the students told us about this, and the parents also told us. Actually, right before Christmas, we were doing some follow-up interview with one of the families, and the mom was still talking about the conversation they had around AI over dinner table. I think that's really a big success for us. For the next step, as I mentioned, we're going to revise this curriculum, and we want to work with more educators across the settings. Thank you very much. That's all what I have. Please feel free if you have any questions, ask us about that. I think I also posted we have all the curriculum online here. Put it in chat. And all the curriculum has been online, and you can see from this is our website for each of the units. We have the major kind of slides we use. We also have kind of roughly the script for teachers. You don't need to follow the script. It's just to provide an example about how we approach this activity. And sometimes we also added about the lessons we learned and the teaching steps we have. Yeah, like this, we have some kind of learning objectives, and we have the kind of instructions. Instructors can say them, and should we wait for students' answers, all this. Yeah, but I encourage you to look through our website. We have all the website, all the activities has been updated here. Yeah, and for the next step is we are fortunate to get another kind of NSF funding to continue working on this curriculum. And as next step is we're going to work with teachers, think about how to potentially bring this potentially to middle school classrooms. Yeah. Okay. Let's stop here. Please feel free if you have any questions. Yeah. Let me know.
So I'm curious. So you've mostly been using this in a summer camp. Do you anticipate this being integrated into like daily school curriculum, and in what subject it might be integrated, or after school club, or what other settings you think it could be used for?
Yeah, definitely. That's actually our new grant is about. With this new grant, we're working with 3 school districts: Chicago district, I think Virginia. We are also working with Virginia, and also a school district in Florida. And our goal is we want to put this into middle school classrooms because remember we have such a heavy around ethics piece. And we feel this would be a good fit also for social study classrooms, and definitely good fit for the technology classes or computer science classes. Yeah. but we are looking for teachers, even like the generative AI piece. So we will always be amazed to have any art teachers even think about how to potentially incorporate that in their classrooms as well. And also I want to share, because the current curriculum is actually 30-hour curriculum. I think for any classroom teachers, especially middle school classroom teachers, middle school curriculum is always packed with topics. And we're aware of this, and we are actually working with teachers to find out what are the key elements or key activity that the teachers think is more important for his or her subject, so that the teacher can choose just to implement the parts. As I mentioned, this curriculum definitely is module based. We have certain like a fundamental what is AI. Those are the almost the key module. But for the next step, you can choose. Let's say if you are more interested in generative AI, you will use that module. If you are more interested in teachable machines, you will use the supervised learning module. Yeah. Just to be more flexible, so can accommodate teachers' needs.
Any other questions or comments or?
I have a question related to the camp responses from the students, because I believe you probably took did an evaluation or some kind of survey. But I'm assuming I wanted to know if the students found any if the students found the curriculum to be at their level, like something that they could find success in, and if there were anything that your instructors who were teaching the students noticed as areas of misconceptions that they came across through any of the lessons.
That's a great question. Yeah, overall, I would say in terms of the difficulty level of this curriculum, we did not see any really kind of challenges for students to understand for this curriculum. I think the main reason because is if you get a chance to look into the curriculum, we have tons of would say all those kind of AI inspired tools developed integrated in there. So we literally very limited instructional time, and kids spend more time working on this kind of hands-on experience. And we always, after students have this experience, then we talk about what kind of concept we related. So we feel that's actually a really good strategy. Another piece is even I think one of the most challenging concept might be the discriminator and generator in the games activity. And that's where when Daniela was talking about, we present all the different kind of analogy to students and help students to see what's the kind of relationship between that analogy to what's actually happening there. That's what we found out. Yeah. And we feel definitely middle school students will be able to understand this. It's just still, as I mentioned, we need to make sure to make it more explicit to students about the connections between what they just experienced with the technology, with the underlying concepts. That part, I would recommend the teachers spend more time on that.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions?
Also, I also want to mention about one thing. This is something we really worried when we develop this curriculum. We really worried that in the curriculum, students, because all we presented are the bias of AI tools, right? The bad consequences of all this. And we're really worried that we actually conveying this message that AI could be damaging, could be dangerous to students, to people's life, all this. And until we started talking to students after in the post interview, we really worry that students will feel that okay, AI is completely negative, and we should, try to stay away from AI because all this. And what we found out is actually in the AI in the interview question, we have one is about can you give us some examples about the potential, the good things or the bad things of AI? And students actually give us tons of the good things about AI. And we were very surprised because a lot of parts were not mentioned even in the curriculum. And this is what we found, even that some of the students told us that they actually found all this because they were doing the career search, because they have their some kind of careers. For example, one student was saying she is interested in becoming a lawyer in the future, and she wanted to know how AI will impact the job of a lawyer. That's where she understand about all the kind of limitations of AI in terms of doing kind of lawyer related work and also the benefits of AI. And she talked about a lot of things in those, and she put them as good parts and bad parts. So we were very pleased to find that. Yeah, we feel, gosh, we forgot to mention. Actually, AI is so helpful, particularly say, in the health kind of in those kind of parts. But yeah, actually, kids get all this information from the career piece. We were very pleased.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate you coming out here today, Helen, and everybody for attending. Please don't forget everyone to complete your session survey. I put the link in the chat.